today, though there were some things that were on my mind, and it's a story that I'll share at the very end, and I thought that would still be a good idea for today. And of course, today being Memorial Day is important to think of those who have laid down their lives for us so that freedom can be here. And it doesn't matter what country you're in, we all have people who are serving and protecting us. And I love how it doesn't have to be just an American thing for Happy Memorial Day. This is something that can be celebrated all over the world. Now, it was nice to be able to be with my family, and we were able to do some things together and just be able to relax, to be there with each other. Of course, I still have all the story Crossroads in my mind. So whether or not it's a holiday, it's on my mind. If it was Christmas, it was New Year's Day, Story Crossroads would still be on my mind. And that's okay. That's the big dream. I love it. And I love how we keep growing and doing new things. Now, if you listened to last week or you've been on these before, you know that May 13th was a very big day. That's our biggest day of the year because it's the Story Crossroads Festival, but we had to transform the live storytelling festival into a virtual one. And it turned out so wonderfully, and we're still working some things out with that. We still want to push those links so that people can watch them, and we'll see where we're at a month from that event, and even a month and a week from that. So where I'm really going to cut off the numbers, not that I can't peek at numbers in the future, but June 20th is when we'll cut that off. And why is that? It's because we have a different countdown. We now have Saturday, June 20th from 9 a.m. to 10:30 a.m. Mountain Daylight Time. That's because we are having a panel, and it's called the Big Y panel. Historical Storytelling Meets Humanities. And I am thrilled that we're able to have 4 panelists, and not just 4 panelists, but 4 amazing panelists. If you are familiar with their work, you already know that you're going to want to be here when it comes June 20th. We are going to do it through Zoom, but the attendees will not join us through Zoom. It's going to actually be Zoom that will then be broadcasted, multi-streamed to YouTube and Facebook and Twitch. So no matter where you're watching this right now, that's exactly where you can watch the Big Y. Because there's plenty of workshops out there about how to do this. But what about asking ourselves as human beings why we like to tell stories as another person, as someone from history? And that didn't actually kick off until after the Civil War, which, thinking that today is Memorial Day, is very fitting for that, because Memorial Day, what did it used to be called? It was, anybody, if you're out there, do you happen to know? It would be Decoration Day. So Decoration Day transforms into Memorial Day. But when it comes to that, we think about the divisions during that time. We think how people were split up during that time, and they had different opinions, different thoughts. What do you do with that? Well, what some people did is that they had still fought even after the war. Other people, they decided to listen to other people's stories, and some people then told stories from both points of view, even back then. But still, I don't want to go into that too much because that's coming up June 20th. But what have we been doing besides that? We've been wrapping up with Spectacular. We were collecting feedback forms, and so there were some people who filled them out, and we definitely love reading what people are thinking about things. And what's really nice is that we are able to have a drawing from that. So we did end up having 6 winners, and we posted out there on Instagram and on Facebook. And by doing that, we're able to then let them know by email, and we can mail out their prizes, which is exciting. So we actually had someone who won who lives in Germany. We had someone who won who was from Australia. And we had a couple people from the United States. There was 2 people who won from Utah. And it was great. I think that turned out really nice. And of course, there's no mail today, but I can get those sent out tomorrow. So that will be exciting. And Jim, yes, you made it. I'm glad you made it. And you know what's interesting too is that we have a second month of using Restream. And what I discovered is that when I signed on, it didn't link to everything. It linked to Twitch, but it didn't link, it looks like, to Facebook or YouTube. So it doesn't look like it's actually streaming to those places at that time. But luckily, Jim, you come to Twitch, so we're all good right there. And hopefully you're able to honor many people with your family today. So I know that that's a very important thing. A lot of people have traditions, whether it's today or during the weekend, to clean up a grave area and be able to have the flowers and everything. That's lovely. And yes, welcome. Nice to see you there. So you're the last Jugovic. I think I said that right. It's a little bit tricky to say. Oh, and welcome too. So it's the Beans. Welcome, welcome. Yes, happy Memorial Day. Happy Memorial Day. I've been thinking about a lot of people who I appreciate. They didn't lay down their lives, but they definitely laid down a lot of time when it comes to Story Crossroads. I was thinking just today about John Adams. And you might think, oh, you're talking about one of the founding fathers, John Adams. No, actually, this is not that John Adams. There's a John Adams that has served for a long time with Story Crossroads, and then he couldn't for a little bit there, but he still supports us tremendously. And he, back in the day, a few years ago, he would go from place to place, school to school, to let them know about Story Crossroads and to set up our field trips. And I was just amazed. I would think he would just make some phone calls or send out some emails, but that's not what he preferred to do. He preferred being in person, and he was such a fun person to talk to that, of course, that's the best way for him to go and do that. So he hasn't passed on. These aren't people who have passed on, but people who have helped a lot with Story Crossroads that I'm still thinking of. I can still honor people who are living, right, on Memorial Day. And another person who, she's still on our board, and she helped with a lot of things, is her name is Michaela Hansen. And Michaela actually put together a Google Sheets with all that information, all those contacts that John suddenly had from those schools. She put a ton of that. And that just, I can only imagine the hours it took just to type in all that, because John worked really hard, so that meant Michaela had to work really hard. And Jim, it sounds like you said you just talked to John Adams today. Oh, and that's sad about Tammy, that she's having some problems, that he's at home caring for her. And it's like John. I'm not surprised that John will be right there by her side. And so yes, I'm sending good thoughts and prayers for Tammy and for John. Thank you. And maybe you can even let him know that I was thinking about him today. Or I should tell him. I should tell him that I was thinking about him, right? And other wonderful people, Mary Ann Kirk. Mary Ann Kirk, not even with Story Crossroads. She actually helped with Holly Robison in creating the Murray Storytelling Showcase. And that is a storytelling festival that is in Salt Lake County, and Murray is kind of their own world. They're very independent. They have their own library, they have their own school system, and they had their own storytelling festival. And Mary Ann Kirk one time at a Mountain West Arts Conference said, Rachel, I hear that you have this storytelling festival, or at least this idea for one, and it could be county level and mine city level. Let's see what we can do. And because she pushed it, because then suddenly Story Crossroads came to being. She's like, well, let's have a community meeting. Let's just have one, like next month. And we had 28 people from all over because of Mary Ann Kirk. So again, she didn't lay down her life, but she did lay down that time, lay down that encouragement that made Story Crossroads possible. There's so many people that I can just think left and right. I think about Lynn Wing and Janine Nishiguchi. and they were in the original committee with the story training and telling committee. And because of them, we actually have lesson plans that actually have how-tos for like 6 hours worth, because of Lynn Wing and Janine Nishiguchi and Carl Bailing. I mean, they really put that together, and just glorious. And we have people today that are wonderful on that committee. I'm sure Jim will agree to that. Oh yeah, I think I mentioned Carl Bailing. Yes, he definitely was huge with that. And right now on the story training and telling committee, we have Jim Luter, and we have Julie Barnson and Laurie Allen and Kira Larkin. And they have a lot of people to suddenly look through with the applications. They have a lot of videos to watch, though that's a fun job if you think about it. Watching storytellers, and these are all wonderful tellers. I guess it's a hard job, though, too, because then you have to make decisions. We can't feature all of them in one year, so there is that. So I really appreciate just that whole committee. And then guess what? When you actually have to plug them in, because we actually feature 15 professional story artists, that takes a bit to do. That takes a bit to make sure that everyone has their spots. We always have everyone have at least a couple times that they're performing. This year, of course, was different. And then I had to turn to the committee for a different reason, saying, okay, what do we do now? We want to feature them all. We will at least feature them all in 2021 and bump everything a year, but at least we can have some people who perform for this year. And actually, it's nice to see that David Sharp is on here, because of course he and his wife Carol performed May 13th, so that was really wonderful. So I've been thinking about a lot of people today that I know that a lot of times I am this face of Story Crossroads, but it is not at all just me. There's so many people just doing all kinds of things to make things work. The other thing that I was thinking about was all that I'm learning now that would have been nice to know before, but I'm glad I'm learning now. One of those things would be the summit. I've been going to this Small Business Grit Summit, and I didn't even know about it until Jessica Robinson. Now, Jessica Robinson produces a lot of storytelling shows, and what she is able to do is just amazing. She has what's called Better Said Than Done, a whole series. She has usually 7 or more tellers on the stage, and lately she's actually been featuring a ton of people outside of her area. So I believe, if I know this correctly, I think Jessica's more in the Virginia area, and there's a lot of storytellers out in the East, but there's now, because of online and virtual possibilities, she's having people from just all over. In fact, there's a performance I know that's big for her coming up on May 30th. So you'll have to check out Better Said Than Done. And they are on Instagram and Facebook and all kinds of social media, of course. And besides that, you have just the know-how. And I'm honored that I'll be on a panel with Jessica Robinson as well as Sheila Arnold, and then moderated by Tim Araneta on June 6th as part of the National Storytelling Network virtual conference and festival. And because of her, I was able to know about this Small Business Grit Summit. And I wanted to touch on just a few things that were happening for me as some aha moments. And this is actually put together by Jennifer Crawford and Mary Sue DeHill. And these ladies are just delightful. When I go on the Zoom for these meetings and I see their faces, I am already in a good mood just looking at them. They put everyone at ease, and they have just a great sense of humor. They have their specialties. So, for example, Mary, or I guess I should say Mary Sue, she's actually over what's called Work Smarter Digital. And so she works a lot with CRM, being able to manage customers or patrons or however you might want to call them, and being able to work on clients, being able to be smarter on how you go forth with that. And then the other one is with Jennifer. She actually does SpareNet, SPARENT, and she calls it the mother of all virtual agencies. So they do a lot of things that helps virtually, digitally. So this kind of conference is really up their alley. I couldn't make it at all the first day, but this is going on for a couple weeks. And I was able to go on the second day, and there were workshops like 3 key strategies and steps for business owners to break through the noise. Because whether you're a storyteller, a performing artist, running Story Crossroads, you always have to have this business mind. You have to think, okay, there's a lot of things going on right now. There's a lot of Facebook live events. There's a lot of YouTube live events. There's a lot of just streaming. How in the world do you stick out in all of that? And what's helpful is that with Story Crossroads, we've been around for a few years so that people are getting used to us. They've seen posts here and there. And our branding, we do really good with our branding. Obviously, you can see our lovely logo there. And sometimes that in of itself can break through the noise. It can be tricky if you're new to break through that noise, but then I would recommend to collaborate and connect. But there was another one that was fascinating that was called Savvy Social Media Marketing. And this one was led by Allie Martin. And she actually was amazing. She was spitting out numbers with all the different social media. And what was fascinating about it is that, yes, I'm familiar with these platforms, but I never really thought about, well, how many posts should you be making on each of these different spots? So, for example, Allie was actually saying, if you're actually wanting Twitter to work out for you, you need to be posting or commenting or a mixture of that at least 15 times every day. I'm lucky if I put a tweet out maybe once a week for Story Crossroads. So I'm not doing too much with Twitter. But Allie kind of made me feel better too, because she said that Twitter is actually not doing as good. It's kind of dying, but it's still there. It's very popular for those who follow sports. But storytelling, sports, they're not usually the same crowd. They can be, but they're not usually the same crowd. So the fact that we're not doing 15 tweets every day with Story Crossroads, it's probably not terrible. She actually even gave permission that if there are certain social medias that are working better for you and there's ones that are not, to just drop them. Now, I'm not at a point where I want to suddenly drop Story Crossroads Twitter. I actually have our e-newsletter and our virtual storytelling events email list. I have that automatically send out through Twitter. So it's not like there's never any content that is out there, but could it be done better? Yes, I definitely found out it could be better. Allie also mentioned that if you're going to post on Facebook, that you really should be posting no more than maybe 2 times a day, which makes sense. And now I've posted on Facebook a couple times today already for Story Crossroads, so I know that I've maxed out. I can't post anything more on Facebook until tomorrow. Then I can post again, right? So what I posted today was about the promo video, because I'm going to be on that panel with the National Storytelling Network with the virtual conference and festival. So I'm part of a panel on Saturday, June 6th. So that was put out. And because I'm executive director of Story Crossroads, it does link to Story Crossroads as a Story Crossroads post. And then the other thing I put out is I also put out the event for June 20th for the Big Y panel with Historical Storytelling Meets Humanities. So that I put out. So I felt like if I put any more, yes, then it feels like there's just too much from someone. So if you happen to be a person who's posting more than twice on Facebook, then Allie Martin says you might want to double check on that. I don't think she actually said stop that, but it was more of a recommendation about how many times are you posting. The other thing is she brought up LinkedIn, and Allie was not the only one with this summit that talked about LinkedIn. I have to admit, I do have a profile on LinkedIn, and of course, Story Crossroads is mentioned in that. But what Allie reminded me is to relook at LinkedIn, that LinkedIn, especially now, has gotten more popular. When businesses can't really network in person, then LinkedIn, because it's much more business focused, is a better place for that. And there was another lady who also talked about LinkedIn and how important it was. In fact, her name is Carlyn Ankrom. Now that's Carlyn, Karlyn, and her last name is spelled Ankrom. And her session was called Leveraging LinkedIn for Lead Generation. And her whole thing was on LinkedIn, not just all of them like Allie was talking about. It was just on LinkedIn. And a lot of us in that session, we suddenly had a LinkedIn awakening. That's what Jennifer Crawford said, that she had a LinkedIn awakening. And I agreed with her. I said, I'm having a LinkedIn awakening as well, because I am part of LinkedIn, and if we're connected with LinkedIn, then wonderful. But a lot of times it felt to me like an online resume. And Carlyn kept saying, no, it is not. Don't treat it like that. You have to make sure you're talking in the first person when you're using LinkedIn. But there's a lot of new features in there. You can actually feature content. You can have articles, and you can actually have better traffic or attention, or people who are going to make the next step for Story Crossroads, for example, if you use it right. She said if you already have blog posts, see if you can rework them and then add them as an article within LinkedIn. A lot of times you can connect your social medias to each other. So LinkedIn to Facebook to Instagram, you can link them all together. And once you post one place, you can kind of go everywhere. But more than once, I've been hearing from people, don't do that. Try to be putting it out in the platform itself. So if you are putting something on LinkedIn, put it up on LinkedIn. Can you do something similar on Facebook or Instagram? Yes, you can. But just kind of keep your audience in mind. So I'm going to work on that. Have I had time to do that yet? No. Because part of what I have to balance right now is not just looking back on Story Crossroads Spectacular, but I have to look ahead for grants. I thought there was a grant that was going to be due tomorrow, May 26th, but instead I found out it was May 29th. So part of me breathes a little bit, but at the same time, you should never have it too close. So I do want to finish up what I can tomorrow. So maybe it's good that I thought it was tomorrow, because then maybe I can get it done tomorrow, so it's in plenty of time before May 29th. Yes, it's not good to push it to midnight. And a few weeks ago, you might have heard about my interesting 11:59 p.m. grant experience. It worked out, but still not recommended, everybody. I am also thankful for the grants and things that pop up that suddenly you didn't realize they were there, and someone sends you an email and it's at the perfect time. That's what happened actually with Utah Presenters Network. There was an email that was sent out from the Utah Division of Arts and Museums, and they said, hey, remember, there is this, and it's due by this date. And it really wasn't that hard to do. I was able to fill that out and complete it, and it felt good. Every time you not only make a deadline, but make it a few days or so before a deadline, oh, everyone, it is glorious. I'm sure you've been there. It's like, oh, thank goodness. So that's what I'm doing a lot of paperwork now, a lot of final reports, reflecting, but then we have to think about 2021. Have to. Oh, though, going back again to that Small Business Grit Summit that's based in Virginia, but it's virtual, so really it's anywhere. Something that it's in the back of my mind, but now it's really there, is the fact of having online courses. Now, Story Crossroads, we have had every year at least 3 free 8-hour workshops. They're in person, but nowadays we don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if senior centers, how soon they're going to let us even go in and have these workshops again. I'm really wondering. But is that going to stop us from teaching people how to do storytelling? Of course not. So an online course may very well be the way to do it. Now, we can do it through Zoom. We could have people jump in on Zoom and maybe limit it to so many people so people have enough time to be coached. There is that. But I think another way is an online course. And someday, it will not be this year, but someday, maybe next year, or the end of next year, or 2 years, we will have what's called Story Crossroads Academy. I don't know what will all be in part of that. This is a recent idea. This is why I have these. The behind the scenes and crazy ideas, which of course still has to be talked about with the board. But I can picture something like Story Crossroads Academy. Not that we would suddenly be a university, but be a place where people could learn the basics of storytelling, where it would be at least an 8-hour, but you would have different modules, and per 8 or 10 minutes of that module, you'll probably get a video that connects with activities, and video and activities, video and activities. So it would have to have a lot of videography involved. Definitely we'd have to look for grants or some kind of funding for it, but I think it's very possible, and being how it is today, we have to kind of think that way. Yes, like Jim was saying, wild idea, Academy, great thought, I'm in. Oh, good, Jim. Now, Jim's part of the board, so that's helpful. But we got to convince the whole board, and we need the funding. You have to have ideas plus funding. But you got to get the ideas sometimes, and then get the funding. Sometimes you get the funding, and then the ideas come. But this is one of those where the ideas first, and then we'll have to figure out the funding, right? We'll work it out. All these fun dreams, bit by bit, are coming true. And if you don't speak it out loud, and now that this is being streamed and recorded, this is even more so the reason to celebrate and go, yes, let's move forward with this. Yes, there's a lot of things to work out. It's not going to happen tomorrow. It's not going to happen maybe even for a year or two. But I definitely feel it. I feel it, that this is something that we need to do. And then there could be specialized online courses for storytelling. And that one, I think what would have to happen is we'd have to reach out to the best of the best for certain specialties. We'd have to strike a deal and figure out what would be fair in paying that storyteller to then create this course. And probably each time someone takes that course, at that point, because we could track it, we could actually pay royalties or a percentage to that person. We can't do royalties when it comes to views on YouTube or any of those platforms, because those are not something that's tracked. But if someone registers and signs up for an online course, then that's different. Then we can actually have a certain special deal with the storytellers. And I don't know what that would be. Now, the lady who actually taught about the how to do online courses, she actually, I'm trying to see what, and her name was Molly Ruland, Ruland, Molly. What a fun, crazy character, I have to say. But she said, whatever price you think of putting on an online course, that she recommended you add at least $100 more to it. And part of me is like, wait a minute, we're so used to offering 8-hour storytelling workshops for free. And I still see that as something that's important. I like having things that are accessible. But perhaps if they are more specialized, if they are more advanced, then we would do something of a higher fee. And she reminded all of us there, saying, well, we'll think about it. If someone's offering a course and it's $99 and it's the same topic and someone is charging $650, aren't you at least a little bit curious about the $650 and what's making the difference between them. Wouldn't you kind of lean that way because of what she said was the perceived value? Huh. Interesting. So a lot of things to work out. I think the basic storytelling, because we like having the basic being available for people, I see that as being either free or very, very nominal in a fee. But if we're doing more specialized things and we're making a certain contract and deal with these storytellers, then we may have to really think hard about what that would be. And we've offered, if it's a bigger cost for people, we've offered payment plans before. Not that there would be interest or anything, but just where it could be divvied up. I know the National Storytelling Conference, at least in years past, I don't see it for this year, but for years past, they have offered a payment plan where maybe you had 5 or 6 months to pay it. And then suddenly $400 for a conference ticket doesn't feel so bad if it's suddenly cut up into $50 or even $100 portions. Much easier to do. Who knows? But this is way in the future. In the meantime, I have to think about June 20th. That's the big countdown. We have to think about organizations and individuals who are into history, organizations and individuals who are into storytelling, and people who do a mixture of all that, or people who are just plain curious. And that we will continue to do. And Jim, I know that you had a few ideas, because besides the Story Crossroads Academy, we are looking at having eventually a membership with Story Crossroads. Now, very carefully, I want you to know this would have no conflict with the Utah Storytelling Guild. And because there are storytellers, and you can have a dues-paying membership with Utah Storytelling Guild. I see Story Crossroads membership as not as a guild, but as people who maybe don't call themselves storytellers, but are interested in the power of story. Obviously, if we have this Story Crossroads Academy together, then there could be a reduced fee if you're a member. There would have to be other benefits too. A lot of things that have to be brainstormed. Definitely something that will be discussed with the board. We have to celebrate spectacular, but then we'll also start thinking and planning, and yes, lots of research. So like Jim is saying, sounds like I need to do a bit of research. Yes, well, not just you, Jim. You can research, but we can all pitch in for that. But anything we can learn and figure out, the better, definitely. So with that, any thoughts? Or I'm pretty excited about what we can do. Besides, you might say, is the traditional storytelling model, which would be performances, workshops, that's normal. But when you suddenly transform it virtually, when you suddenly have membership or subscriptions, or you have online courses, this is different. And it gets things more complicated. It means that we will need to grow, not only as a board, but we're going to need to grow and have more volunteers and people who will research and look into these things. People who would be fascinated to learn about these things. So if that is you, hey, let us know. You can go to storycrossroads.org. You can also email info, the @ storycrossroads.org. Just email and saying, hey, I'm curious. I'm totally happy to research and look into things for you. Or, hey, I happen to know someone who knows this type of thing. Great, because we're in research mode. Besides, of course, what did I say? Countdown to Saturday, June 20th. You will definitely want to be there. And you'll see right below that there's storycrossroads.org, the big Y. That has all the details you need for the panel coming up. Any thoughts? Are you excited? I'm excited. Yeah, very excited. I do have a story for today, because I'm looking at the time, and I do want to always end with a story. And because today is Memorial Day, this one came to mind, but it's going to be different because it's the classic tale, but with my kind of twist to it. There was a soldier, and he was done. He was done with the war. He had looked left and right and in front of him and back of him. He had been surrounded by so much bombing, so much fighting, so much blood, so much war. He was done. And he was thankful that it was time for him to go home. But it was a long way home, and he didn't have much money, so he couldn't even pay for a train or anything, really. He just had to walk by foot. As he traveled, he finally made it to a village. He looked around, and he remembered this village. He was almost home. He was almost home. But he had traveled for so long that he had gotten hungry. And he looked down and he could see that he was wasting away. He felt like he could see right through himself. So he knocked on one of the doors, but no one answered it. No one. So he knocked again, and still no one answered it. And finally he just kind of sighed and made a little moan. And it was finally when he made that sigh and that moan that the door creaked open just a little bit. And there was a lady back there, and she was shaking quite a bit. Now the soldier didn't want to scare the lady, but in the nicest voice that he could think of, he said, Ma'am, I am John Jacobs, and I've been here before. It's been a long time. I've been out to war, and I'm just so hungry. If there's anything that you could give me, if there's anything at all. But the lady behind that door, she just kept shaking until she just closed the door, just practically slammed it. And this surprised the soldier. He had never known any person in this village to be like this. But he stepped back, and he knew that there was another home. And so once again, he knocked on the door, and no one answered. He knocked on the door, and no one answered. So finally, he just let out a big breath, and he moaned. And that's finally when that door just cracked open a little bit. And instead of a lady, there was a child there. And this child, too, just had wide eyes and was shaking and was pale. But once again, the soldier said, my name is John Jacobs, and I've been here before. I just need a little bit of food. Could you run to your mother, your father, see if there's something? Until that door was just slammed shut. And again, the soldier went from door to door, and no one could give him anything. Well, he went to the center of the village, and he kicked around some stones. And as he kicked around some stones, he had an idea. And he picked up that stone, and he blew on it, get the dust all off, and kind of rubbed it against his uniform, and then he knew what he could do. He looked, and he saw that outside one of the homes was a pot. It might have been left outside to air out, to dry. He didn't know why, but there was a pot. And he picked up that pot, and he could see where there was some spring water, and he filled it up, and he tossed in that stone. And he yelled out, "I can make my own soup. That's fine, everybody. I can make my own soup. And it's the most delicious kind. It's stone soup." Then he started to cook water in that stone. But then the lady, that first home, the door opened up. And the lady just tossed out a carrot. And the soldier took that carrot and cut it up and put it in the water. And then the next home, there was that child, and the child threw out some potatoes. And the soldier picked up those potatoes and cut them up and put them in that water with the stone. And then on, and bit by bit, everyone seemed to be tossing something out. Delicious things like cabbage and onion, and someone even tossed out some salt over their shoulder. And all of this the soldier added. And finally, he could smell it, and he could dip his hand in, at least when it cooled off a little bit, and he tasted it. but he couldn't taste anything. And that's when he noticed that there was someone who had crawled out their window and rushed off into the field somewhere. The soldier was curious, and so he followed that person. That person ran off to the cemetery. And in the cemetery, there was a stone. And that person was crying. And when John Jacobs looked at that stone, he saw his own name. Then he understood. He understood it all. He had laid down his life during the war, and he was still being remembered. So a different kind of spin to Stone Soup. That is a classic story. And Jim is saying right here, did you know that at the end of the Battle of Saratoga, the most important battle of the Revolutionary War, the British soldiers who were captured were allowed to leave as long as they promised not to fight anymore. And they all headed for home and kept their promise. And that was better than a prison camp. And that's so true. It's nice to be able to offer peace. And perhaps that's a kind of a strange story with Memorial Day, but it just made me think because the Stone Soup story is almost always, it's a soldier returning home. And in my mind, I thought, well, what if that soldier returned home, but maybe he wasn't alive? And how would that twist that story? First time that I ever told that story, so I'd like to work that out a little bit, but it was on my mind because of Memorial Day. And thinking of all the people who laid down their lives for us, and people who are living, who laid down their time, laid down their talents for us, and always appreciative of that. So tonight, please remember someone today until we tell again.